2025 has been another year, and luckily I was able to play a bunch of video games throughout it. As has become tradition, that means it is time for me again to talk about some of the ways they had an effect on my life. In last year's video, one of the main takeaways was that I didn't play anything that meant all that much to me. I enjoyed a bunch of games, but I didn't connect with any in the way I often do. While I largely assume this was due to picking the wrong games and also being in a weird headspace as I was navigating life with both a toddler and a newborn, making it hard to process much of anything, a small part of me worried that my relationship with games had fundamentally shifted, that this change was a part of me getting older, that I was becoming less capable of finding experiences to resonate with on a deep personal level. And 2025 has proven that this was not the case. I don't know that there's been a single year of my life where I played more titles that left a profound impact on me than I did in this past one. Like, there are multiple games that if I had played them in 2024, they probably would have been the primary focus of that video, but they kind of get lost in the shuffle when put next to the many incredible experiences I had last year. Simply put, it was one of the most enjoyable years of playing games I've ever had, and I want to share some of it with you. So I'm going to start where I always do, with the first game I played last year, which this time was Hypnospace Outlaw. Hypnospace Outlaw is the weird type of game where what would be considered the actual game part largely is just a vehicle to get you to engage with the lore. The player takes the role of a moderator of forums and web pages that feel straight out of the 1990s, and this setup provides all the motivation needed to scour every page for potential infractions. While finding these violations requires a good bit of deduction, making them satisfying to discover, it is the actual contents of these pages that make Hypnospace Outlaw a game I reflect on often and fondly. It presents an alluring representation of the old internet, an era that, at least in my experiences, didn't truly exist, but has an undeniable appeal all the same. One of community, of sharing passion, of making art, all without the algorithmic hand and financial incentive that defines the current internet. Every page is filled with so much personality and explores the stories of various characters in ways that feel shockingly authentic. There is no shortage of media that cops the 90s aesthetic, but a lot of the time it feels like a hollow imitation, one that coasts on the belief that doing stuff like reminding you of the pattern on the side of those disposable cups will be enough to pull you in. But here there is humanity behind everything. There's a sincerity to even the most unhinged pages that makes the forums feel like the kind of digital space people would want to be a part of. The artistry on display is on another level. The writing, images, music, all of it weaves together to make these web pages feel like an artifact of the past, but with all the boring parts shaved away. Even the art that is meant to be quote-unquote bad is enjoyably bad, which is not an easy thing to do. They pulled off a nearly impossible feat, and it really is something special. As a trademark 90s kid, it's no real surprise that this game tapped into my nostalgia for that era, but that's not really why I enjoyed it. And I don't think you have to have nostalgia for the 90s to enjoy it. Because honestly, it did more than just remind me of the past, it elevated it. I had a similar feeling with a couple other titles last year, the first being Burggeist. It's a game that feels like it would have been right at home on the PS2, but has design philosophies that are decidedly more modern than anything that actually would have come out on the PS2. To my knowledge, the developer Cairn Studios hasn't specified what games influenced Burggeist, instead pointing to things like history, animal behavior, numerical sequences, and oddly shaped rocks, and honestly all of that does show. However, it feels like it takes cues from stuff like Shadow of the Colossus, Drakengard, and even Brutal Legend, leading to something entirely unique and surprisingly singular in vision. It finds ways to meld these ideas that seem like they should never work together and somehow nails it. The other game was Angeline Era. With a chunky PS1/N64 aesthetic, it takes what seems like the most simple approach to combat, that being bumping into enemies to attack, and creates all sorts of interesting levels and encounters around it that brings far more more depth to the mechanic than it has any business having. Through and through, the design is just so thoughtful. For instance, the majority of levels are made up of locked rooms where you need to clear the encounter to move forward. As the game is pretty tough, especially so if you're on a higher difficulty, there's a good chance you'll die a bunch, sending you back to the start of the level and making you do it all over. It's a run back of sorts, which I know people have opinions on, but what works about it here in terms of avoiding the frustration that can come from this type of setup is that unlocking the door to the next room doesn't require killing every single enemy. Instead, each encounter has a specific clear condition, generally tied to taking out a much smaller fraction of the enemies. So with every attempt, you're not just figuring out how to better position yourself in order to not take damage, but also what the criteria is to unlock the way forward. It adds a new layer of thought to every room and quicker ways to progress, keeping these runbacks from becoming tedious. Not to mention, once you've played enough, you'll start to recognize sort of themes and patterns, making it possible to predict what might clear the door. And when you're able to do this on a first time through a level, it feels incredible. It's an elegant approach to difficulty and failure as it tests both the player's skill as well as their knowledge. This makes it so having to replay sections feels far more palatable, as there are multiple ways to improve, and the success almost always comes from an increase in the player as opposed to the character. From top to bottom, Angeline Era is filled with playful design like this that rewards players for noticing things. As Giovanni Colantonio put it in his piece on Angeline Era, the result is a rare retro game that actually plays the way I remember old games feeling, even though it's nothing like them at all. In my experience, this felt true with Angeline Era, Burggeist, and Hypnospace Outlaw. Each of them harnesses an aesthetic from the past to set players' expectations, and then deploys game design ideas that do not draw specifically from a single title from those eras, but instead from many titles from all sorts of eras, where you may be able to see some sources of inspiration, but would struggle to really say it is just like one specific thing. It is not uncommon for indie games to look like retro games or even feel like retro games, but to Colantonio's point, it is rare for them to make you feel the way you did when playing old games or when living in old times. It isn't enough to just be familiar, it also needs to have something fresh, and these three titles have that. And so they remind me of how much I love video games. And not just playing them, but also thinking about them. Seeing creative spins on old ideas that prove that we are really just at the beginning of what games can be. Not to mention, these three titles were made by relatively small teams. And to be clear, I'm not saying that to demonize games with far bigger ones, but to point out that there are many ways to make a game, and that a team with a strong creative vision that learns to master limitations and iterate in unexpected ways can create some of the most compelling art out there. Throughout 2025, I continued the trend I started the year before of getting more into multiplayer games, as playing stuff with other people, as it turns out, is fun. I finally got around to It Takes Two with my wife, which maybe will be a video someday, but at the very least, it was just fun to watch her adjust to the ever-shifting nature of that game. I established a game night with a couple of my friends that I've known since we were kids, and it has been such a welcome routine in my life. I know for a fact that when we were 10 years old playing Melee in my parents' basement, we never would have expected to still be doing some version of that nearly 25 years later, and so it has been a great joy that we have. Now, with the wide spread of games I've played with them as well as with other friends, there is one title that really defines my multiplayer year. And that was Elden Ring Nightreign. Nightreign is a weird kind of good. In a lot of ways, it feels messy, which is understandable as it smashes together a bunch of stuff from older FromSoft titles and then uses the Fortnite storm to tie it all together. It truly is a testament to how fun and varied the combat is in Elden Ring that Nightreign stays as enjoyable for as long as it does. After my first few runs, I figured I'd play it until beating all the bosses once or twice and then would never pick it up again. However, at this point, I got all of the achievements around the 30-hour mark and have put in 70 hours since then. And frankly, I feel like I have a lot of runs still left in me. And of course, a big part of my enjoyment came from the people I got to play with. There was just a ton of interest in it from people in my wider circle of friends as well as acquaintances. So along with my game night group, I played with so many different people, ranging from friends I play stuff with all the time to folks I've long known but have never really been in a voice voice call with before to friends of friends, and I loved it. Meeting new people and seeing my friends from different circles merge brought me a ton of joy. I also loved helping people get through the game, and really that has been one of my biggest motivating factors to keep playing. I still have people I want to beat all the bosses with. There's something about seeing the game click for new players, watching them go from being overwhelmed by the scope and time limit to making calls of where to go next. It's been a special game to learn and teach, and one that I'm still shocked FromSoft decided to make. While hanging out with friends and meeting new people doesn't have to be tied to the pretext of playing a game, having something to rally around does seem to make doing both more likely. And it's been a while since I've played something that does that as effectively as Nightreign. One thing that's been interesting for me is, given the amount of time I put into Nightreign as well as other titles that roughly could be described as roguelites, 2025 was the year where I finally had to admit to myself that despite always saying I'm not a huge fan of roguelites, I'm actually a pretty huge fan of roguelites. Ravenswatch provided a satisfying co-op experience with plenty of cool synergies to experiment with. Absolum mixed a roguelite structure with a beat-em-up, which honestly just makes too much sense, and I'm surprised I have not seen far more games use this combination. Blueprints created an ever-expanding puzzle box that I don't know if I'll ever be able to fully solve, but a part of me will always want to, and Hades 2 took nearly every system from the first game and found a way to elevate them, and while it does end up being a bit messier than its predecessor, especially in regards to its narrative, it still had my brain buzzing for dozens of hours. I know the genre has moved so far away from its roots, but in doing so, developers have found tons of interesting ways to iterate on the core concepts and combine them with other established genres, leading to wildly compelling systems that I at least have been able to connect with more than the ones in traditional roguelites. Frankly, this kind of was the year of me connecting to genres I often struggle to connect to. Maybe the best example of which can be seen with how much I fell in love with the open world of Cyberpunk 2077. I'll be honest, I'm still a bit surprised that I like 2077 as much as I do. I imagine a big part of that comes from expectations. For the longest time, my only exposure to it was hearing how terrible it was, that it was broken beyond just being buggy. Even as CDPR updated the game and the conversation around it began to shift, a part of me still expected it to kinda suck. It's just so rare to bring a game back from the brink like that. Not to mention, the Cyberpunk setting isn't one I'm all that interested in, so it was easy to feel like even if it was good, it would never be a game for me. But then it was. Something about Night City felt different from any video game world I had been in before. The density, the detail, the depth, it felt material. It felt substantive. I've played a lot of video games, plenty of which have impressive worlds that strive to create a sense of realism, but none of them have felt real to me in the way Night City did. And it isn't because it has a strict adherence to realism. Plenty of other games do far more on that front. It's more that it's so overwhelming in scope, from the size of skyscrapers to the mess of roads to the number of pedestrians to the limits of the city, that it becomes easy to fall for the illusion it aims to set up. One of it being a real place where you are the tiniest part of it. And this illusion is bolstered in some surprising ways. For instance, nearly every building can be scaled and parkoured across. They're not just things to fill the skybox. This won't come in handy for every player, but it will for some, and the ability to even be able to do it feels surprising. In Night City, whether you're at the top or the bottom, so much of it feels considered. Of course, there are gaps, it's far from perfect, but I found a solidity in the city that made it so I couldn't help but buy in. I talked about this in a previous video, but a trap I find myself falling into regularly is relying too much on mechanical motivation. I have trouble engaging with parts of a title that don't necessarily build to something bigger, that don't fold in with the other mechanics all that cleanly. But with 2077, I didn't struggle in that way at all. I didn't need any convincing to be in this world, to explore it, to engage with it, to take my time. I didn't fast travel once, and instead opted to ride my bike everywhere, weaving between traffic as the lights of the city flashed by. I'd call these friends to help pass the time on longer trips, and was pleasantly surprised when I actually started caring about them. I found the city so alluring, so overwhelming, and so there. that I couldn't help but appreciate every minute I spent in it. And look, the game does plenty of things that would normally pull me out of an experience, the biggest being its story that calls for urgency despite that urgency not actually mattering. But I was fine to live with some of that dissonance, to even try to headcanon my way out of it. If these were V's final days to live, my final days to live, I was going to live them free. And so I connected to the world, and that made it all that much easier to connect to everything within it, to empathize deeply with characters I kind of assumed I would never care about. I not only fell in love with a game that I never expected to love, but I also fell in love with it for reasons I never expected to matter so much to me. I've always found a title having a real sense of place to be an important aspect, but typically as a supporting piece, not the primary one. And so it was refreshing to experience it the other way around, to forgive things that are often deal breakers for me due to the excellence of an element I tend to look past. After finishing Cyberpunk 2077, I planned to play some shorter games to refresh my palate a bit, as the idea of jumping into something else all that substantial, especially another RPG, seemed like it would be exhausting. But then, out of nowhere, this game called Clair, Obscur Expedition 33 came out. About a month before playing Clair Obscur Expedition 33, I turned 34. Thankfully, as I began the game and the gommage claimed everyone my age, I too did not dissolve into petals. Instead, this moment, as well as the wider concept, acted as one of the most intriguing hooks I've ever seen in a game. The initial question Clair Obscur explores, that of how should one live their life in a world that is fading away, is one that makes my mind burn. As individuals, we all have to accept that one day there will not be a tomorrow for us, but the silver lining in that comes from the ways we live on through those we love, through the things we make, through the change we bring. But what if all of that is slowly fading away as well? For Gustav, the members of his expedition, as well as those of expeditions past, the answer is to find a way to make things easier for their successors, to bring them a step closer to stopping the paintress. They fight for a future they can't even really envision, but will die in the hopes that it can come to pass. I found this energy to be irresistible. Every time I heard someone say "for those who come after" or "tomorrow comes," I couldn't help but repeat it under my breath. As it is a video game, I figured one way or another this would be the final expedition, but I still approached it all with the desire of bringing about something better for the next generation. Of course, Clair Obscur ends up being about more than just this. It explores purpose and existence from many different angles that stray far away from the initial conceit. And while those explorations are interesting and effective in their own ways, the ideas introduced at the start are what really made the game matter to me. As I've gotten older, the way I view the future has shifted. For so long, I saw it as something I would inherit, and in some ways I still do. 34 feels much younger than I expected 34 to feel, and with any luck there is significantly more future ahead of me than there is past behind. But also, I now see the future as something to steward, to keep safe for those who come after. I felt this way for a while, but obviously having kids has escalated it to new heights. Clair Obscur is compelling on so many different fronts, but it was this ethos, this dedication to making sure tomorrow comes, that got me to care so quickly and so fully. Because sometimes the only way to overcome the impossible is through years and years of consistent actions that add up until the impossible doesn't seem so impossible anymore. Speaking of which, on September 4th, 2025, Hollow Knight Silksong released. Given the amount of time that has passed since its initial announcement, I grew beyond having any sort of expectations for the game. I pretty much entirely stopped thinking about what it might be like, and instead only thought about it through the lens of running bits, whether it was reposting my pain of waiting thumbnail or ending every one of these yearly videos with some variation of "here's to hoping Silksong actually comes out this year." And I'll be honest, when I said it at the end of last year's video, I was positive that this would not be the year. I figured it would largely be more Hollow Knight, and in some ways it is, although far less so than I expected, and it differs in surprising and welcome ways. They didn't just take the knight and add more. They took Hornet, adapted her to make sense as a protagonist, and built everything around that. They made sure that the sequel justifies itself. And so it walks the line of both feeling like a natural progression of Hollow Knight through its general approach to aesthetics and world design, as well as its own thing. It operates at a completely different speed, and while this took a bit to get used to, once I did, I never looked back. Regardless of whether or not it was the game I expected or thought I wanted, it ended up being the one that I needed. It not only resonated with me more than its predecessor, but more than almost any other game I can think of. There certainly is a chance that the shine of recency will wear off and my opinion on it will dim, but right now it is in that top 5 zone. I relished every opportunity I got to get better at the movement and the combat, which is to say I was always relishing as the two are so often paired together. I basked in getting truly and utterly lost, refusing to use the compass because I wanted to really know my way through Farloom, and by the end I did. I found assurance in Hornet's strength of personality, her insistence on imposing her will on the world despite how treacherous and powerful that world may be, and refusing to let it happen the other way around. Really, this last part is the one that surprised me the most. Hollow Knight's narrative primarily exists through lore just below the surface, but Silksong stands in the forefront. Hornet has purpose and she makes that known. Through her and her observations, the game explores the effects of power, whether it be from structures or individuals, and I never thought I'd be so inspired by the confidence of a little bug. I never thought I would need to be so inspired by the confidence of a little bug, but here we are. Over this past year, I've dabbled a bit with doomerism. I'm not proud of it, but it regularly seeps into my thoughts. Never before in my life have I seen more pieces of news where it was hard to think anything other than it's so over. To be clear, I don't really think that it is, or at least I can't really think it is because I just can't. However, we are in the midst of an era of great consequence socially, economically, and technologically, and those who are at the helm, those who have the most power to dictate how the next 20 years will go, are the people I trust the least to act in the collective us's best interest, proven by how they never do. And so maybe it isn't a surprise that the 3 games I connected to most last year explored what it takes to survive within an ultra-capitalistic hellscape in its latest stage, what we are left with when each passing generation has less of a future than the last, and how the stubborn and careless use of absolute power decays a society from the top down. It's sometimes good to be seen by the things you play. I think a lot about games as a form of escapism. And what has always been the case for me, what it always seems to come back to with the games that get me through the year, is that the ones that bring me the most relief aren't the ones that make me forget everything. They're the ones that help me process it all in a way that doesn't feel as heavy, in a way that doesn't feel as impossible, in a way that doesn't feel like it's so over. Because thinking that it's over is useless. It doesn't help anyone. Despair is easy, and those who wield it as a weapon know this. The goal is to make it all seem like an impossible machine for any individual to do anything about, but it's not about any individual doing everything. It's about many individuals doing something. It is about community. And reminders of this are what get me through each day, whether they come from watching my kids grow up and witnessing the ways they are loved not just by me and my wife, but by family and friends and teachers, all of whom have played a part in shaping who they are now and who they will be one day. Or from seeing people rally together like those in Minneapolis who have engaged not just in protest and fundraising, but also in a level of dedicated local mutual aid unlike anything I've seen before in my life. Or even from playing as a bug who discovers that despite there being no quick and clean way to undo the rot of corruption, the best path forward is and will always be to help those who need it and be willing to accept help from them too. There are many reasons to want to despair, and so it has been important for me to do everything I can to find even more reasons to not. It doesn't matter where they come from, it just matters that they do. That instead of feeling paralyzed by the inability to fix everything, I have the clarity to focus on the ways I can do something. I needed games in 2025 in a way that I don't think I have in a long time, maybe ever. And what still kind of surprises me is that they met the moment. Frankly, I probably willed them to meet the moment. Playing them and talking about them made me feel human. What's more is that instead of simply distracting me from the pervasive sense of existential dread that is just part of my life now, they helped me refocus. They made tackling everything else feel easier. I get the sense that 2026 will be the same way. Like always, I do not know what this next year will bring. I have my hopes and I have my fears, but neither truly matter that much. What does matter is that it isn't over. It's never over. So here's to the new year and remembering that Hollow Knight Silksong actually came out. So anything is possible. Reflecting on my year in gaming is something I look forward to every January, and I also look forward to hearing other people's thoughts on the stuff they played and what it meant to them. So with that in mind, I thought it'd be fun to have a recorded conversation with two of the people I talk about games with the most, Iron Pineapple and Yako CMN, to discuss our thoughts on gaming in 2025. We talked about our games of the year, our not so obvious games of the year, more granular stuff like favorite mechanics and moments, and even our biggest hater takes. If you're interested in hearing that conversation, you can watch it right now over on Nebula. I've talked about it before and will again, but Nebula is a big part of why I get to do the things I do. It supports the work of tons of incredible creators, many of whom are in the gaming space, like Jacob Geller, Game Maker's Toolkit, Eurothug 4000, and provides various opportunities for those people to create great stuff. For instance, King K's series Masterful Mimicry, where among other things he delves into the artistic and historical influences of various games. He's covered Okami, Silksong, and most recently Cuphead, and all of them are great. In general, there is a ton of exclusive videos over on Nebula, and even a handful made by me. Along with the conversation I had with Pine and Yako, I've done a dozen or so videos you can only watch over there. So if you'd like to check them out, you can go to nebula.tv/Rasputin or click the link in the description to get 50% off for the year, coming out to $2.50 a month. And if you really love the idea of Nebula, right now you can get a lifetime subscription, which is normally a one-time payment of $500 for just $300. You can also gift monthly, yearly, and lifetime memberships to those you think might enjoy it. Nebula is a massive pillar of support for myself and all the creators on there, so I appreciate you all listening to me yap about it for a bit. Anyway, go check out my conversation with Pine and Yako, as well as Masterful Mimicry and everything else the site has to offer. Thanks to Nebula for sponsoring this video. For all of you still here, hi, hello. Thanks to my patrons for making this possible. It makes all this easier. It makes all this better. I appreciate you. And yeah, I don't know, have a good day and or night. I hope you're well. I hope your new year is going okay. Take care of yourself, okay? Bye.